نجاهد ونناضل ونقاتل من جديد غرباء هكذا الأحرار.
Being sincere in our ibadah, it is absolutely vital for us. To be sincere in our worship, in our dealings with Allah Azza wa Jal, in terms of our own worship. And Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned this in chapter Al-Bayyinah, verse number 5, where He said that they were commanded to worship Allah. This is what Allah Azza wa Jal, He's commanded us to do, to worship Him alone and to be completely sincere. To be completely sincere. And this matter is not something which is anything trivial or should be even be up for discussion, but rather it's a matter which every single individual should know himself. That for every matter in relation to our worship should match two conditions. The first being that it should be sincerely for the sake of Allah. Having ikhlas, having the sincerity in the worship. And secondly, making sure that the act in itself is based upon the sunnah. So when we then talk about Millat Ibrahim, and being upon the Millat Ibrahim, being upon the path and the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam, carrying the da'wah the way the Anbiya they carry, then we need to understand the very basis of this da'wah, the asl of this da'wah, the very foundations of this own da'wah in itself. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmahullah, when he spoke about the foundations of the da'wah and the foundations of the deen, the asul al-deen for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, he said the deen is based upon three foundations. Number one being al-istislamu lillahi tawheedan wa inqiyadi lillahi ta'atan wa bara min al-shirk wa ahli. These three matters which many people they cannot even understand nowadays because it's not spoken about. And if it is spoken about, then it's not highlighted in its correct meaning with any substance. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentioned al-istislamu lillahi tawheedan. To have this complete istislam. Islam, it means what? Submission. Does not mean peace. Does not come from the root word just salama and that's it, we leave it there. Rather, istislam, complete submission. Submitting your own will to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, to the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, to worship Allah Azza wa Jal exclusively. Secondly, he mentioned wa inqiyad lillahi ta'atan, and to have this complete following and complete submission and obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. Wa ta'a, tawheed al-ta'a wal-ittiba', as spoken about amongst many of the ulama in their own books when talking about the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. Part of our worship is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone, and to obey Allah Azza wa Jal alone, and to make sure that you follow His commandments exclusively alone. His commandments being His own hukum. Just as the ayah said in chapter Al-Yusuf, verse 40. In al-hukmu illa lillah. The right of legislation is for none but Allah Azza wa Jal. It's not for any man. It's not for any rock. It's not for any stone. It's not for any government apart from the legislation which comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. The hakamiyah being for Allah Azza wa Jal. The hukum being referred back to Allah Azza wa Jal. Thirdly, وَبَرَى مِنَ الشِّرْكِ وَأَهْلِهِ. وَبَرَى مِنَ الشِّرْكِ وَأَهْلِهِ. Having al-wala wal-bara. Loving and hating for the sake of Allah.